So welcome to Startup Stories. My name is Siobhan Curran and I'm the manager of the University of Newcastle's Integrated Innovation Network, or I2N. The I2N, for those of you who aren't familiar with who we are and what we do, we're all about boosting economic growth and diversity through entrepreneurship and innovation in the Hunter region. And we do this by fueling the success of innovators and entrepreneurs who have great ideas or really interesting research discoveries, regardless of their affiliation to the university. We help those people build ventures by connecting them to community, coaching, customers, and capital. So we do this by managing two co-working spaces, the I2N Hub at Hunter Street and the I2N Hub at Williamtown. And we have another hub opening at Honeysuckle, which is scheduled to open about this time next year. So we offer a range of programs in those hubs, and they're developed to cover all the stages of entrepreneurship. So from enterprise skill development at the very beginning for emerging entrepreneurs, all the way through to pre-accelerator and accelerator programs for startups. And then we also offer incubation for scale-ups as well. And that incubation is co-working with mentoring. So normally we'd be having our monthly event Startup Stories at one of our two hubs, but times have changed and we're gathered here virtually. Speaking of gathering, I'd really like to acknowledge that I'm I'm hosting a virtual networking event from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I'm actually based in Sydney today, while we have our wonderful guest up in Newcastle. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this meetup. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and I'm celebrating the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. You can show your respect and awareness of country that you're joining us in from by letting us know in the chat function at the bottom of your screen. And that chat function is there where you can also connect and comment with other attendees as well. So we've taken a number of questions from attendees at registration, and we'll be leading with those after our speaker provides a brief background on their startup journey. And then we'll open up to any questions that have been asked via the Q&A function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And you can upvote on those questions too. So we'll get the most popular ones asked first. One good thing about virtual events is I don't need to point you to where the bathrooms or the fire exits are. Hopefully you're in your home or your work and you already know the drill. So now I'm going to move on to introducing our wonderful speaker today. Kylie Burrett believes most people are capable of drawing in the same way most people are capable of reading. She and her husband, Glenn Lawrence, have spent years working with children of all ages, which has helped them realise a fundamental gap in spatial reasoning education. And this gap, along with a lack of tools available to led the two to designing their first spatial drawing tool, the Splat. And I remember working with some students from different high schools across the Hunter region on one of our Ideas Collider events, and both of them turning up to introduce us to the prototype version of their Splat. And we were really amazed that this tool was there, but also developed by people who really understood the problem very well, being teachers. So the tool fuses geometry and creativity for students. And combines these isometric elements for rapid visualization and product design. And it's been a really useful tool for a lot of our startups that code through our hub to help draw and design prototypes of products that they've been thinking up as well. So they've invested their own money and time to develop a minimum viable product, and they've been testing and iterating their designs with a 3D printer, just like all good entrepreneurs should. And their first break came when they were awarded the Engineers Australia endorsement and sponsorship deal, which helped them to develop the product. I'm not going to go on to explain any more about what they've achieved to date, except to say that we're really excited to have you here today, Kylie, and I'm going to hand over to you to tell your story.
Okay. Start my video. Okay, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, fantastic. Hi everyone, it's fantastic to be here with you all. I'm going to share my screen and jump straight into our story, and then I'm really excited about taking some questions. So hopefully that's going to come up. And I'm going to go in present mode. Okay, is everyone still with me?
Yep.
Okay, fantastic. So hopefully you're seeing those slides, Siobhan.
Not just yet, but sometimes it takes a second.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me see if that works.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So as Siobhan's already said, I'm Kylie Burrett, and I founded a company called Design Nuts, and I am in partnership with my husband, Glenn. And we are really grateful that you've taken an interest to hear about our story and how we've bootstrapped our startup, which is a totally different approach to getting capital venture. So our aim as a company is to help students embrace the power of design, skills to delight, sustain, and empower people and communities everywhere. So that's really what we want to do. We really want students to have the skill sets so they feel empowered and that they can make these amazing ideas into reality as they go through their journey in schooling, and then hopefully onto careers in engineering and science and innovation and industrial design. So there's all those areas. Spatially, the skills spatially underpin success across any area. So we live in a 3D world, and it's really important to understand that when you're talking about developing these skills, they're so much broader than just a design, market, or engineering. So if you want to be a doctor in the future, if you want to be a mechanic, it's all got to do with how you interact virtually and in a real 3D space, and how well you can move between our real world and a virtual world with those spatial skills. So I'll just move into our next slide. So our journey so far. So as Siobhan mentioned, we gained sponsorship by Engineers Australia, and that was through the Newcastle branch. They committed funding for our tooling. So our original tool was actually 3D printed at home. And over a long period of time for us, it was probably 12 to 6 months of working prior to the March date that you're seeing that we gained sponsorship. And that was for to have a steel cavity made so we can have injector molding in Australia. Now, what's really important about that is that our product is Australian made. It's 100% recyclable, so it can have a cyclic life. So the tool, if broken, it could actually go back and be melted down and made into another splat. So there are all sorts of important considerations, and it was really important to us as teachers promoting innovation and design in Australia that we were able to have like a beginning to end process in terms of production within Australia. So which is quite interesting, because when we did go and try and get the tool steel cavity made, there was really very, very few people left in Australia with that skill set, and that many companies now actually send the tool and the steel over to China to have it made over there. So even though it may come back to Australia, the actual art of having that tool created it's actually really hard to get done here in Australia. So that was an eye-opening experience for us. A very short time after that, we launched the tool. So there was quite a hungry market once we started on this, which caused us to gain 2 really good partnerships early on, which was Engineers Australia and also the New South Wales Department of Education through their SIP program. So that's a STEM industry schools program where industries connect with the department to help students develop their STEM skills. And then I guess we're shooting forward then to almost a year later. We had launched our kits and new programs with the Department of Education. I was starting to run the business full time, so that's a massive transition in that year. That's gone from having this idea and launching it, like just me and my husband helped. And then by that time we had a 9 times return on our original investment. So that was really important for us. It also led to us winning a internationally recognized gold Good Design Award, which is a highest accolade. It's, I guess, for a designer, it's like winning an Oscar. So that was amazing. And that was for innovation and sustainability of our product. And we also launched into the national campaign with Engineers Australia for the Create It campaign that they were running. So that was a really, really solid year for us. Moving into this year, has been really interesting experience because of COVID, obviously, and all the changes that related there to our business model and how we were going to still service our schools. So the really big thing for 2020 for us is looking at scalable programs, and we're doing that. So we have still got our launch, we've got our 5 for Design started. We've launched an online design school for teachers, and we have completed a series of digital products, as well as we now have an e-learning platform as part of that online design school. So it's been very, very busy. And so I'm just going to talk to you about a couple of things about our journey. So one is we hear a lot about products and great ideas, and there's a lot of conversation around that, which is really great. But I would encourage anyone that's looking at doing anything like what we've done is that you need to start with the problem, not the product. So the Splat didn't exist at the beginning. We had no idea that we were going to even invent a Splat, but we knew we had a problem. And so it's through deep research around that problem that allowed us to go on that journey. The other one, from my perspective, decisions are decisions. Now, I've got that one there because working independently and being bootstrapped, I was really worried about making the right decisions constantly, like the right decision. And that can cause quite a bit of anxiety. So one of the best things that best piece of advice that I got was, decisions are decisions in the sense that they're not essentially good or bad, but when you're moving through a process, you collect data about that decision that you've made, and it can inform the way then that you move forward. So it's really important not to get hung up about the right or wrong, or, is this person the right person to talk to, or is this person the right person to talk to? It's really about continually creating momentum. And when you agonize over decisions, you stop the flow and you reduce your momentum. And so that is really important. The other one that I've listed there is simplicity and friction. So for us, I guess our advantage was we had a really, really simple idea, and we needed to learn how to onboard people that were interested into the product, to using it in the classroom and using it at home, the kids. And that soon as you increase complexity of your product and the way the people interact with it, you create friction for them with interacting with your product. So really what you want to do is have someone be able to use your product very simply and be filled with delight and really get immediate feedback about the product. That's the user. And when the product is more complex or there's any sort of level of confusion there, it creates friction with the person using your product. So I would definitely vote for a very simple, layered approach as you get to know your product and understand your market better. And so thank you. That's just a little bit about our journey, and just a quote there from Jonathan Ives. So there's no learning without trying lots of ideas and failing lots of times. And it's actually been some of our biggest failures that have led to our success. So there's been times when I was in the process of doing the first prototype and I went to send it off to have a look at how I'd get the steel cavity made and what the costs were associated with that. And the tool was too big and I couldn't afford to have it done. So I have mentioned this before that, it just felt like months and months of work completely came undone because my husband and I, we gave ourselves a $5,000 budget to start this up. $5,000. And so we said, if we cannot make something happen with $5,000, then it's not a good product and it's not going to happen for us. So that is the level of simplicity that we took and the budget that was associated with that. And it was actually in going back to the drawing board and refining our product and making it even simpler and smaller, that we actually ended up with the great result in the end that went on to win us that Good Design Award. So definitely don't be afraid of failing. Don't get stuck on making the perfect choices. It's really about a process of momentum and feedback and connection with a community that can help you along the way. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Kylie. Just some really solid gold insights there, I have to say. And it obviously speaks to your amazing experience to date. So thank you so much for your time this morning. We do have some questions that audience or registrants asked when they registered. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to hit you up with the first one, which is really, I guess, focused around people who are emerging entrepreneurs. So when in your career did you realise this gap in children's education, and how did you come to build the Splat to solve it? So you might have talked a little bit about building it, but when did you realise the gap, and when did you decide I'm the person to actually solve this?
Okay, so I'll just give you a little bit of background in the sense that I didn't mention before that my skill set as an educator, but I also have quite a long background in children's media. So I have a really in-depth knowledge of children, but I was doing my master's at the time that I uncovered this problem. And my master's is in education information science. So it's very much around creation of products for students, and you know, like how best people process information to create all sorts of, you know, engaging products. And then the other side of that is my husband. He is actually a background as an industrial designer and engineering teacher. So we had a really good mix of skill sets and a very good idea of the problem. And it was through my master's degree that the conversations really took off.
Talk about the magic ingredients, right, to develop a product. And I guess that raises a really key point about, especially for emerging entrepreneurs who have an idea, is the willingness to be able to partner up with someone who has skills that are missing for you. And that seems like that happened really naturally for you. So maybe you're one of the lucky ones, I guess, having a partner who had that sort of industrial design experience, but also working with children in education too. Have you had to bring on other people on the journey to fill any of those gaps that both you and Glenn had?
Those initially, those two skill sets were enough for us to get up and running. Since then, we have a lot of partnerships that we're actually currently involved in. That helps bring skills to the table. So I think that's really important, that is to note that it's not necessarily getting 3 other founders, or it could be, or, you know, having all these virtual assistants running around doing things that you don't perceive to be your skill set. It's about having a really broad understanding of all the skill sets required, and potentially partnering in those early stages with people that can help bring skills to the table, even if it's just partnering with I2N, you know, like in the beginning, like consider that a partnership. You're coming and you're joining that community, and you're gaining skills. So there's a lot of ways to look at informal partnerships that will really benefit you.
Thank you for the mention. We do like partnerships.
Yeah.
The next question is, do you have any suggestions for things founders should focus on when bootstrapping their startup?
Okay. I'll probably start with the business model. I think that's really important. I think, you know, like you must know that you have a problem, and you have to have a deep understanding of what it is that you're tackling. right? So I think that's like the foundational element. From there, you have to have an insight into a business model and understanding how to commercialize your product, which Glenn and I really, didn't have a clear idea when we started. So a lot of this is unfolded. And the big one there in that business model is the thing that really saved us and was unexpected at the time was having a passive income stream attached to that business model. So that was really important. And because we started so small, it was easy for us to generate that income stream because we didn't have a lot of overheads and we were still working. So that's one really important one. The other thing that I think is really important that has limited us at times is not being aware that you need systems at scale. So when you start really small and you bootstrap, so that creates like that bottleneck effect where I'm sort of like, I've got all the ideas and everything's, I have that history of the business and the knowledge of everything just all trapped in my mind. And you really need systems that scale with the business, and that's incredibly important. So that's business model scaling. And the third one, I would say, I'd actually go mental health. So the very third thing I think you need to be aware of is that success is different for everyone. And my idea of success is going to be very, very different from someone that is ambitious to have the #1 app on Apple, right? Or be trending on Twitter or any of those sorts of things. And I think that one element of your perceived success criteria needs to be your mental health, because what I have learned is that passion can be a vulnerability. And that when you're incredibly passionate about what you do and you want to give all your time and energy to it, it can actually have a negative impact on you. And we don't realize that it actually, it wants us to be passionate and connected and we want to do all these things, but it's about striking a balance for the long haul. And you really need to have a long game plan. So my last one would be, look at your success criteria and factor in mental health and balance, because it's a killer for creativity.
Can I ask then what that looked like for you in terms of managing because you're so driven and you've got so much passion and energy, and it's really infectious actually. But how did that mental health criteria work for you?
So probably the very first thing is realizing that I had to let go of my job. Now I have to explain it. Like, people think as a founder, you'd be like so excited to ditch that job and, move ahead with the business. But for many founders like myself, if you're working in an area that you're really passionate about, my job, I loved it. I was in a school, I'd worked, I'd trained, I had, for me, the dream job. And then I had this, love affair over here with this project, and it literally felt like a breakup because at some point it was too much. And that was where I actually took time away with some girlfriends and tried to have a total different change of scene, and took some positive books with me. And I came home and I quit my job on my birthday. And my girlfriend said, go, you're now 43, not 43. So you're my age. And so I came home and I quit my job, but it wasn't like a joyful thing. It was almost like having two lovers, and I had to choose one to marry and one to let go of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's a lot of stress in itself, choosing that path. So I guess for me, that was the very first thing. And then a year later, probably during COVID, I hit another stumbling block with my mental health. And at that point, COVID was great timing, and I got to reassess a lot of things. And from that, we've actually made some serious changes to the workflow and the balance of family life and everything. So in some ways that has been really beneficial. And it's actually now, like, I'll share a little secret with everyone. is that I've purchased a coral pink pair of Asics shoes. And 2 days a week when these shoes are on, I am not allowed to do admin or work. These are times where I put those shoes on, and if I'm in those shoes, it's a cognitive strategy that I have to be in a creative, playful zone where it's totally de-stressed. And that's one way that I've managed to find, a little bit of balance.
I love that idea. It's like your ruby slippers.
Yeah.
To go away from the, boring every day to somewhere that's really about what you need to do to, preserve your mental health. I love that idea.
Gotta have fun.
Gotta go.
Yeah.
Maybe when I'm wearing glittery tops is when I have thanks so much for sharing that, because I think entrepreneurs and particularly founders of high growth potential businesses, mental health affects them far greater than other people, and so I think it's really important for us to be talking about coping strategies, or just at least acknowledging that it's a thing. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. I've got some questions here that are specifically about the business. So one of them is, explain the difficulties an early stage startup has with little or no financial backing.
Okay, all right. Everything. So yeah, I think that starting small, having really small goals that allow you to sort of move with growth. So there are a lot of limitations there. The biggest one is time. Like, how do you work full time, run a family, maintain your good nutrition, instead of getting takeaway every night. And so there's a lot of things there. So the difficulties are time and striking the right balance. So I think that is the biggest difficulty, because you've got no money to employ anyone to do anything. So you really have to be able to do everything. Long term, it does help in a lot of ways, because it gives you a fundamental grounding in your business and the standards that you want when somebody else joins the team, or you outsource a particular task, and I've done it before and I've done it to this level. So that really does help inform how you manage your journey, I think.
And what were the standout indicators which led you to believe you had a commercial business for your solution?
The interaction with the product. Yeah.
So sparking joy.
Yeah. It was, I remember the first time I was in a classroom and I tried it, and I got goosebumps, like all over, like I just couldn't believe it. And again, and it just still hasn't gotten old when I introduce people to it, especially in those primary years. So it's definitely, we knew then from the interaction and the testing that we did that we had a viable product, but it wasn't until we really worked with to I2N to open up our idea of, the broader range of how to have a commercial business and how we could then use our product to create a business model.
So on that, the next question is, how did you decide on your ideal go-to-market strategy? Did it work in the first instance, or did you have to pivot?
No, so I guess my background really helped there. So for those people that haven't heard the story before or are new, I have a background in, film and television and children's media. So I had actually been involved in a lot of go-to-market strategies. And spent many years working for the ABC, and a lot of that was grassroots strategies where we didn't have a very big budget. And some of the best ways to do that when you go to market is ensuring that you have some sort of partnership that allows or grows your credibility. And so I was very, very clear what my go-to-market strategy was, and that involved Engineers Australia and the Department of Education, and that for us was really important. Since then we have pivoted, and I think that just because you pivot doesn't mean you haven't been successful or something has failed. You constantly have to pivot as you grow. You know, it's just like your kids, every 5 minutes they need a new pair of shoes. You know, it didn't mean the last one failed them. In fact, the last pair are fine. They could probably go to another child, but they have actually outgrown them. And so I think that's important to understand that at every stage, it requires that fresh look and insight into what you need now.
Is that something that happens quite organically for you? Or do you make a point of setting aside time to actually look at the business model again? And, you know, or is it sort of more having discussions with customers or potential partners that you see opportunities and think, okay, how could we make this work within the business model that we have currently?
Yeah, so a lot of it is organic, but then it's about making the right decisions to fit in that business model if something comes up. So I definitely think that there is an element of organic, but two, as I mentioned before, it's very, very important to find the right balance between passive income and then sort of the income that's being generated through consulting or partnerships or things like that. So that is really, really critical to your success. Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more how that worked for you with Splat, the passive income layer and then the partnerships?
Yeah. So what we had originally with the Splat is just the product itself. So a lot of people just think, oh, like what else is there? But it's actually built into projects now. So one of those things is that we have online courses that generate a revenue that are evergreen. So people can just do that course. And that's a teacher registration process where they get hours against their registration and accreditation. And so that gains us money. Having resellers sell the Splat, that's another one that's really good, ships off. And, you know, we have a great relationship with Kookaburra Education Supplies. We're also at Questacon. Canberra, the Australian Design Centre. So there's a couple of different areas like that where we've gone to market and that really helps. But our biggest revenue is through the combined resources and training packages that we offer the education system.
And is that something that was that the partnership with New South Wales Department of Education?
Yeah, one of them. So there's quite a few projects there at the moment, but in the early stages, we registered in New South Wales because that's where we're based and that's where it's easy for us to do a lot of testing and talk to teachers and all that sort of stuff, going to classrooms. So we have registered courses for teachers in that state. In the rest of Australia, it's still, you're still able to, I guess, use those hours, but it's through a different system because every single state operates differently, which is really hard if you're looking at the education market because it's not just one education system across Australia. Every state's different.
I'm sure you would be a font of knowledge for anyone that's looking to break through into any of the State Department of Education. I think it's like that with any state department, whether it's health or education. It's a kind of a journey that you just have to go through, get advice along the way, but I guess you don't know actually what it's like until you've done it yourself. The other question we had here was, were there any barriers around building solutions for school-aged children?
Well, that's a good question. So speaking to that question directly, if you've got a design background or you're going through the process and you're looking at a minimum viable product or you're going through any of the workshops, you'll learn about primary and secondary users. So when you're actually empathizing and understanding what it's like for the user to use your product in a school-based system, you've got to understand that you've got two totally different users. You've got the teacher and then you've got the student. And you've got a journey from kindergarten potentially to year 12. And so you really need to understand the barriers, because if you want to have a viable product, it has to be something that's incorporated into the curriculum, and it has to be something that gives you the biggest scope possible for usage. And so there's quite a few things that you need to consider on top of all the basic things like how the safety requirements are for getting products into schools. So, you know, there's multiple different levels, and also what schools are required to do. And schools, I think in New South Wales, actually, they want to actually procure products off women founders. So, you know, there's some really positives there if you're a woman and you're interested in developing an education-based resource business or something like that, or you've got a product. So yeah, there's a few barriers there that you need to be really mindful of, but the main one is understanding that you don't just have one user in a school setting, you have two, and that is really important. If the teachers don't love it, they won't then even show it to the kids. Doesn't matter how much the kids would love it.
So further on to that point, then we talk about in the customer discovery stage, understanding who your users are, but also who the customer is.
Yes.
So often who's buying it isn't the person who actually uses it. What issues did you encounter in being able to, you kind of had like a 3-level user or customer journey, right? So you've got the Department of Health, Department of Education, or a school that chooses to purchase it.
Yep.
Was the drive to purchase from the students and the teachers, or was it top down?
It's actually been quite interesting. We have found that we've had so much referred business. So I want what they're having, and it'll be a teacher that shares it with another teacher, or it's a student that takes it in to show their teacher. You know, like it's that sort of networking. So it's been really interesting to follow the journey. You know, a few times it's like recently we had a school that bought one for every student. And, you know, this one child had left it at school during COVID or whatever. So, you know, we had all these people putting orders in, and we were like, what's that? And, you know, we reached out to them and said, oh, you know, and they're like, oh, the product is actually being used at the school, and my child has left the Splat at school, so now we're buying one for home. You know, and it was so interesting. By about maybe the 5th order within the day, I was like, I actually rang. So don't be afraid to ring a user. And she was just, I won't say the name of the school, but she was just immediately like, I said to her, is there any chance that you're attending blah, blah? And she just cracked up. You know, I said, well, you're not the only parent this has happened to. And, you know, and it was a great conversation. So don't be afraid to, you know, ring and have those conversations. That's, yeah, that's really good if you can do that.
That's amazing that is that normal that schools provide resources like that? I know some of the schools my kids have had to go to, we've had to bring tissue boxes to the school. They just don't have the funding for that kind of thing. So how have you managed to kind of, have you seen a disparity in the use between different types of schools in different locations?
Not really. Independent schools are more likely to buy for every child at home and at school. So that's quite interesting that they've done that. And I find like more department schools are more likely to sort of buy and then share the resource sort of around. And then what happens is then a lot of teachers end up just buying the resource themselves, so that they have it and they don't have to share it, because, you know, hot resources sort of walk or don't come back, or, you know, those sorts of things. So yeah, so there was quite interesting, because the whole idea of the product initially when we started this was making design skills more accessible to those students that may not have, you know, the fanciest tech to have computer aided design, or they just didn't have access to internet 24/7. So we really wanted it to be worked on in rural and remote or disadvantaged communities. But the uptake in that private sector has been significant.
Can I'm just wondering if near you actually have a Splat to show to the screen.
Yes, and I can, interestingly enough, I don't know if you can see here, but see this one here? This is the digital download that we licensed to the Department of Education. So teachers were able to download that and actually create one at home. So yeah, so this is great. Now we've also got a big one. The big one is here. There's a child. Thank you. Hello. All right, off you go. Have a good day at school. This one is the bigger one, which is the teacher demo one.
Okay, nice. I just thought maybe for some people who hadn't actually like seen one in real life or just seen a photo of one, seeing it up close is always really handy. So the other questions that we've got is around priority management. So we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but do you have any tips regarding prioritization and time management in connection with innovation and the startup of a company?
I really think you need to prioritize your systems and your time, and understand that your passion could also be a vulnerability. I think that that's really important in terms of time management. Bucketing time is something that you hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about when you're like a solo founder, and I highly recommend that. I think it's really important that you manage your time or think about it in terms of buckets, like, and how much time have I given to that project or that particular resource, so that you're not ending up like favoring certain processes that are easy for you, because it's actually one of the things that causes burnout. Is that when you're like a solo founder like myself, I'm constantly having to get down into the detail and do admin, and that is not my strength. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a real struggle for me, and constantly having to do that more than the creativity can really fry you, so the most important thing there is to understand yourself, and make sure that you bucket your time across your priorities, like even visually, like any way, like Trello boards are a great way to do it. Keep a diary. It's actually incredible how much time you waste. So if you can actually look at that time and somehow bucket what you're doing, say you're only looking at marketing on this day or in these times, or this is your creative time, and that will be really helpful to you. Yeah.
Another question that's kind of related to that is, can you describe the journey transitioning from employee and founder to full-time founder?
Overwhelming.
You touched a little bit on it before, but yeah, I'm really interested to hear what and maybe adding to that question is, did you have any perceptions about what that might be like or the risks associated with doing it? And then has the reality turned out to be the same?
No, I think 6 months ago or maybe 8 months ago, I would have said to you probably, oh my gosh, I don't know that I'd do this again, So you really do have those troughs and peaks. And yet now I'm like really excited about the projects, that we're working on, and I can see how we've slightly tweaked our business model that has really helped me understand where I now need to put my focus for the next 12 months, for the next financial year. So those sorts of things in terms of that journey. I think that you get a really strong sense of overwhelm, and your cognitive processes slow down. That's a really good indicator that you need to reassess, like, am I doing too much work full time, on the business and full time work? Should I drop down to part time and amp up? So I think that you have to really be in tune with yourself, and it really comes back to those core elements that I spoke about before in terms of when you're starting up, like your success criteria. You have to understand what that is. And if you haven't prioritized mental health as part of that success criteria, for us, it was literally to pay our mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't, we've reached, we've got 7 figures, because we didn't. It was about, can I pay my mortgage? And that is when we take the next jump, and then the next one. So so I think you really need to look at your success criteria.
So we've actually got a question from one of the attendees here now, and they've actually got a really good question. Where did the name Splat come from?
Oh, okay. So if I can I'll hold the big one up so you can see this. So see the center line here, that one there, the split up the center. In Old English, splatten means to split up. It's a term furniture users and different people used to use. So splatten means to split up. And so it's actually that line that defines the product and the isometric axis. And so splat. And we really like the sound. We thought it was really playful with kids. Look, back then at that stage, we just really didn't have our concept of where the business was going to go. So it wasn't a strategic thing. It just had a technical meaning.
That's really cute. I think it works really well. It's very memorable. You can't figure out the name, that's for sure. And better than, isometric design template or some kind of acronym.
Ellipses.
Yeah, exactly. We've got a question from Bonnie McBain, who's actually an academic at the University of Newcastle. She's asked, Kylie, I hear lots of new businesses work all hours to get the business going at the beginning. So if that's what you are competing with, how do you manage to get a work-life balance?
Yeah, so I had no work-life balance. We have to be really clear about that. And how long you can go without a work-life balance. I'd come off the back of my master's too, and I had a young family. So I've got 3 stepchildren and 2 of my own. So I've got 5 children. We're renovating, we're doing a house. And so I think you really need to understand that it's going to be for a set period of time. And if you haven't achieved as part of that success criteria within that period of time, then you need to reassess. It's not a failure. In fact, sometimes striking a better balance might introduce you to the right person that takes your business to the next level. So I think it's really important to get rid of the fear of making the perfect decision, and understanding that, at the beginning, there is no work-life balance. I would get up at 5 o'clock or earlier. I would do a couple of hours before I did the lunch boxes, kid the kids goodbye, and went to work full time. I would come home, I'd do dinner, I'd get the kids in bed, and then I'd work till at least midnight. And that's what my life looked like for probably 12 months until I became 43.
And I guess that's, it's really important, like you were saying before, to acknowledge the passion and the drive you have and the belief you have, especially when you're getting goosebumps when you're seeing people using the product, right? That's really going to drive you. But being conscious of how long that drive is sustainable. So did you set yourself, was it sort of like, I'm going to give this 12 months and then see what happens?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of I wasn't sure whether my husband really wanted to, step in and take over, and he just wasn't interested. He really, really likes to tinker and be immersed in his design process when he's doing something. So I knew that it was going to have to be me. And at that point, I guess I had a much smaller runway because I couldn't keep doing, I couldn't keep doing both things. So it was a constant open conversation. And I think that's really, really important, is that momentum and flow, you'll be constantly reassessing things. And it's really important, like I said, to have a strong understanding of what your limitations are. I now know mine.
Yeah.
I didn't actually know mine going into this.
Yeah. I don't think anyone does really, do they?
No. And I think that it's an incredible learning journey. And it's if you've got a passion about something, it's well worth doing. But to think up front that you know how you're going to manage it, and you know yourself after that really long stretch of no balance, it can really change things. So, yeah.
One of the other questions we've got is also from Bonnie. She's asking some really great questions. Are the principals and teachers 2 different customers as well? So we were talking earlier about the users, and then also the customers. So are the principals and the teachers 2 different customers for you as well?
Yes. And so one of the really good bits of advice, I've got principals that are absolutely champions of the product. And then I've got principals that are not interested. They may be retiring in a year and they're really, just not that keen. So it's really understanding that, you've got all these different personality types. One thing that I got that was really good advice was to create an actual document that you could give to teachers that they could give to their principals. So that was one of the best things of advice that I got to overcome. So teachers have to go and pitch what they want to the principal. Yeah. And if the principal isn't an advocate for STEM, or he's got different directions for the school at that time, then how can it be persuasive? So I actually created something that the teachers could just print off and give it to their principal and go,
That's such a great idea. I see that a lot now with professional development courses and conferences.
Yeah,
They'll have like a little section on the website that says what you should tell your boss about why you need to go to this conference. It's
that's
just bullet
true.
pointed the pros, the benefits for the boss and the company.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually a really, really great strategy. I love that idea. So that's pretty much it right now. Unless anyone wants to ask any more questions in the Q&A, we're going to be wrapping it up in a second because we've gone through all of our questions from our registrants and then people who have tuned into the live chat. Is there any way people can reach out to you if they've got any questions for you subsequently?
Yeah, so I think it's great if anyone's got any sort of questions. So we're admin at Splat 3D. The website is just .com. The website is just splat3d.com. So you can either fill in a like the form on the internet, or you can email us. So that's fine. And I challenge anyone that's got an idea. Since COVID and reassessing everything, I don't do coffees or anything like that. I've done plenty in the past, and I feel I've given enough goodwill to sort of be at a point where I'm really trying to strike that balance for myself at the moment. And so I challenge anyone that's got an idea to present their problem at an I2N gathering, which I sometimes come to. Ask me if I'm going, and sort of really use the network to meet the people that you want to engage with, because, someone offering you a coffee is, probably an hour of your day for $4. Yeah. And if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about that, then you are not going to have a successful business. So my no at the moment to anything like that is purely related to the fact is a lesson to really get involved with a network. Yeah. And understand the value of time for money. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really great point. We often get that a lot too at the I2N is, hi, can I just drop into the hub and let's have a cup of tea? I really need to tell you about an idea that I've got. And like we were just talking about the conference, providing the bullet points of why, you need to go to this thing, or the value that this is going to provide. Sometimes just an email that's like a pitch of what it is you're actually thinking about is enough for someone else who can provide you advice to give you advice. And you're making a really good point there around the times we live in COVID. We can't have coffees together anymore. And so being able to pitch over email or, virtually in some way, whether it's through a LinkedIn message, is really important to be able to understand how to do that effectively. And you make a really good point about what is the problem that you're choosing to focus on. And why is that important to you? And it's almost like the solution at that point doesn't even matter. It's just understanding what that problem area is first. The other thing that I just wanted to highlight too is that we are still doing networking, but we're doing it virtually at the end of the last Wednesday of every month for Join the Dots. And so, like you said, that's a really great use of an entrepreneur's time, because the networking portion provides contact, not just as a coffee with one person, but with many people in the room.
Absolutely.
And you'd agree with me, Kylie, because I've seen you at lots of events that we've had at the Hub at Hunter Street. You just don't know who knows who so you might be talking to a random stranger, but their uncle could be a principal at a school and they're looking for something like this. So always come to networking events.
Absolutely. I think last time I saw you, I told you that my old boss, who's got a Splat, gave one to Adam Savage, and, my husband and I are huge Adam Savage fans. And so you just really don't know like what that universal energy has got in store for you, and how different things are going to cross your path once you're really passionate about solving a problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We do have one more question here from Cecilia Michael. She's asking, how do you keep mindful?
It's really important. One of the techniques I like to do is called dropping an anchor. So it's just like a mindfulness sort of slight meditation sort of practice where, you know, like you sort of imagine that you're dropping an anchor and you're earthing yourself to the ground, and that you really use your senses to sort of think about where you're at. And breathing is just so important, and keeping in mind that your success criteria can't all be about the business. So keeping that balance, and your mindfulness is absolutely key. And we've got, you know, some really big projects on at the moment. And so I am often practicing mindfulness. Yeah. Because you know, it's so exciting, and then you lift off and you've got all these ideas, like, calm down, you know, I'm one person, I can only do so much. Let's really make it impactful.
That's such great advice. I've actually never heard of that technique before, but as you were describing it, I was doing it and I was feeling calm already. Thank you so much, Kylie. We really appreciate your time. One person has asked, actually it's Bonnie, she's asking whether or not a student might be able to get in touch with you who is planning a similar journey. So thank you for providing your email details. So Bonnie, maybe if that student wants to tell Kylie about the problem area that she's working on, that would be great, or they're working on, sorry. And lots of applause in the chat function for you, Kylie. It's been a really inspirational talk. You're always just such a force and a positive energy force. And we love having women entrepreneurs being able to tell their story as well, because there's not a lot of you. And so when you can be open and honest about what that experience is like, I think it just encourages more women to think about how they might be able to pursue this journey for themselves. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your generosity, and I can't wait to see you again one day face to face back at the hub. But in the meantime, see you online, and thank you to all of our attendees for your really great questions, and best of luck to you, Kylie. Keep anchored. I want to see those shoes, and I'm going to buy myself a pair too. I think that's such a great idea. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. It was great sharing my morning with you. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.